Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. According to the Galactic Bureau of Labor and Statistics, more than 50% of individuals earning a 6-digit salary are living paycheck to paycheck, which kind of shatters this idea that high income earners are going to have an easier time finding financial stability. It doesn't. What usually happens is when you make more money, you end up spending more money. Now that you're an executive, maybe you want to move up a few hundred levels from the undercity of Coruscant to the surface, get that sky view you've always wanted. After all, why work so hard if you can't enjoy your credits? But now that you live on the surface and in the Senate district at that, you're going to be rubbing elbows with the elite of the Republic, the landed gentry. That means you're going to need to update that wardrobe. Cloaks made from exotic animal skins are always going to be in. And your kid is now going to have to go to the best private schools on the surface, otherwise your neighbors will judge you and think you're not really taking care of your child properly. And of course, the HOA fees for that new condo you got, well, it's higher monthly than the rent you were paying in that working class neighborhood where you were renting before. And of course, you can't be driving that rusty speeder around in the Senate district. The Coruscant guard will pull you over every day. And so you finance a Narglatch XJ6. Not because you can afford one, but because that's what all your neighbors have. But it's not about just buying a fun speeder to fly around in. It's about buying a status symbol, showing that you belong. And congratulations, you have made it. And now that 6-digit salary doesn't seem that great anymore. As a matter of fact, you're still living paycheck to paycheck. Things have not changed all that much from when you were earning less money. This is the reality for a lot of people out there with 6-digit salaries. If you want some advice, don't adopt the lifestyle of that 6-digit salary until you're making at least 7 digits. And don't look at other people. Forget about your social status, forget about your tribe and your community. Don't look at what they're buying. Just buy the things that you think you really need and really want. Don't just spend money on something because the Mothmas next door did. They might look like the perfect family, but you have no idea what's going on behind closed doors. Maybe they're in a loveless marriage. Maybe Mon Mothma is indebted to a crooked banker and Perrin is being chased down by loan sharks because of his gambling habits. Acquiring wealth and long-term financial stability isn't very complicated. It can be difficult. And that's because it requires a crazy amount of discipline, something that most people just don't have. You see, we all start our career with no skills or capital. All we have is our body and the labor we can provide. For most people, the first job is a labor job, working as a hand on a moisture farm or a scavenger in the debris fields of Jakku. Labor jobs are simple. They don't require much skills or knowledge, and most people can do it if they are physically and mentally tough enough. Now, some laborers begin to acquire skills either on the job or through further education, at which point they have the skills and knowledge that allows them to earn even more money. A scavenger can become a scrap seller or maybe a mechanic. Or a scavenger can find their way off planet, join an actual institution for learning, and then study to become a designer or an engineer and find a higher paying job. A lot of people think that your financial and career goals end here. Get skills, get paid a higher salary, and that's it. But guys, we live in a post-pension galaxy where the government and companies don't really take care of you anymore. Like in a positive way. Our retirement funds, if we're lucky to have one, are usually put into a 401k, which is then invested into financial products that, they don't tell you this, but they're really shitty financial products that they can't sell to anyone else. And so they give it to suckers with 401ks. And they also usually charge a fee on top of that for giving you those really shitty financial products. And even if your skills and knowledge are great, even if you do have that high-paying job, there are always going to be factors that can make you lose your job just like that, like a new leap in droid brain technology, a war, or political turmoil that threatens your job stability. Maybe the planet you're working on disappears in a tragic mining accident. And so the true goal for everyone's financial journey is not just acquiring skills and knowledge and making money off of it. It's about obtaining capital. It's the key word, it's the root word in the economic system that basically is everywhere and runs everything. And so here we begin to see that salary, while important, is not always the biggest factor in financial stability. For instance, if you make $70,000 as an independent starship mechanic, you could be in a better position to build capital than the IGBC solutions architect who's making 300,000 credits a year. And that's because you, the mechanic, lives in an apartment well within your financial budget. You take public transportation to work and don't have any ship loans. You also took no loans for your education. As a matter of fact, you were educated on the job when you were working for Income Corporation. They're the ones who paid for your certificate. You see, not everyone can depend on their rich dad to pay their way through college. Sometimes it's better to take advantage of loopholes, like finding corporations that are willing to train their staff. And so You, as a ship mechanic, despite only making 70,000 credits every year, can put away 20,000 credits because you're a frugal individual and you understand the importance of saving. Whereas the IGBC solutions architect is weighed down by debt from student loans, a mortgage on a condo well outside of his budget. Maybe he even takes a private limo service to and from work, and that's because everyone else at work has that service, and maybe everyone else also has to go to the finest restaurants and bars all the time, and so he can only save around 5,000 credits a year. And so despite making 4 times more than our mechanic buddy, our solutions architect is saving about 4 times less. In a decade, that mechanic will have saved 200,000 credits. And let's say he averages, 10% annual interest. His entire portfolio will be around 350,000 credits. A nice little nest egg and a great step towards financial stability. Whereas our solutions architect will only have saved 50,000 K and have a total savings of 87,000. Capital defined is anything that brings value or benefit to its owner. When credits are just sitting in your pockets, they're just pieces of metal weighing down your pants. But let's say you use that cash to buy Dex's Diner, now your cash is turned into capital and it's generating more cash. The only problem is it's not the best use of capital in my opinion. Restaurants are really expensive. And it turns out Dex's Diner wasn't actually profitable from a legal standpoint. Old Dex was using his connections to the criminal underworld to launder credits through the sales of Jawa juice and calf. This is not a reliable asset, and as we mentioned before, only invest in things you know. You don't know how to run a company like this. You don't know how to run a restaurant, how to deal with all of the inventory management and logistics. It's a headache. So instead, why not try your luck in the Interstellar Stock Exchange? Like everyone else, buy a small fraction of a company that you believe in that's actually run by professionals. Now, a lot of people are going to be like, well, the Interstellar Stock Exchange is completely rigged against retail investors like you and me. Why even chance it? You have powerful money managers like Damask Holdings who pull the puppet strings behind the scenes. How can the little guy even stand a chance? Well, here's the thing. As crazy as securities are, they are a relatively old investment product and they are heavily regulated. I'd be far more worried about new age investment products. They call them investment products. They aren't really investment products. A lot of these things are just straight up scams like NFTs, all these new cryptocurrencies. I even get the sponsor that calls me all the time and their whole spiel is they take your money and they'll allow you to purchase a portion of a painting and those paintings will all automatically rise in value. That's not an investment, that's a scam. And then there are more classic so-called investment products like timeshares and Scarif, multi-level marketing Tabana gas sales schemes. Heck, you'll have a better chance of making money at the sabak tables on Canto Bight than with these scams. There are always going to be conspiracies in the financial world. There are always going to be bad actors, even within regulated securities. But generally speaking, the less regulated an industry is, the more likely scammers and criminals will flood there. I mean, that's just what happens. And these scammers, they generally target people who either want to get rich quick or are desperate and are greedy. My advice is don't try to get rich quick, especially if you're young, there's no need to. Also, don't be greedy. That's not financial advice, that's just being a human being. And lastly, don't ever get to the point where you are desperate. Focus on your investments at a very young age. Start out young so you never have those problems in the future. So if you're putting credits into the Interstellar Stock Exchange, don't speculate. Don't try to time the market. Don't put money out into the market that you can't afford to lose. And when you do invest, always make sure to go long. And that's because 90% of people go short. Everyone looks at speculation, the short term. Always think outside the box. Do the opposite of what everyone else is doing, and you'll find a lot more wiggle room to make profit. And especially if you are very young, go long. There's no rush. You don't have a fixed income. You're not going to die within 10 years. You can look towards the future. Investing and speculation might seem like the same to most people, but once you start understanding the difference, that's when you start becoming successful as an investor. See, investing is when you find companies that you truly believe in. And no, this is not an emotional belief. Like if you love Income because you love their X-Wings, because they're heroes of the Galactic Civil War. That doesn't mean that Income Corporation is necessarily a good investment. And if you do invest for that reason, you're being emotional, which is a dumb idea. If you take a quick look at Income Corporation's C-suite and management team, they're all brilliant, but very political. Also, in recent years, Income Corporation has shifted their entire operation to serve only the Galactic Republic. Most of their sales used to come from the civilian and commercial market, and that's because they used to mainly manufacture repulsor lifts and not starfighters. They're actually new in the starfighter field. It's because of Income that Bespin's Cloud City has been able to stay afloat for hundreds of years without any issues. But now, because the Clone Wars has started, the Republic is asking for more defense contractors to make starfighters, and Income Corporation saw an opportunity and squeezed in. The problem is Incom was not a very large player in the starship manufacturing industry before the Clone Wars. They were able to win the ARC 170 contract because they underbid everyone else. And this will be an extremely lucrative contract for the company, but they also had to take on a ton of debt in order to expand their manufacturing capabilities to meet the demands of the Republic Navy. And should they miss any shipments of starfighters, they could lose a lot of money. Plus, they still have to recoup all the R&D resources that went into the prototype. Incom Corporation is a fun company, it's an ethical company, but it is in a highly volatile and competitive industry, and it is not one of the larger players in this industry. And now, it's not only transitioning its manufacturing skill set from repulsor lifts to starfighters, which is a huge, thing to ask for them, they also are heavily indebted because of this process. And when the Empire would rise out of the ashes of the Republic, Palpatine would actually nationalize Incom Corporation. And most of the engineers and design team would defect to the Rebel Alliance, and Incom would basically cease to exist. Now, the rise of the New Order was a cataclysmic economic and political event, but such are the risks with investing. Now, Incom Corporation is what a lot of stock analysts would have called a growth stock. Growth stocks are generally companies that are growing at a fast pace. These are usually newer companies, and some of them are not even projected to make money for many decades. And instead, analysts judge them by their revenue-generating capabilities along with future revenue-generating capabilities. Generally, a lot of these growth stocks are going to be volatile, and that means you can lose a lot of money and make a lot of money with these purchases. Now, there are actually certain, I guess you would call it, financial environments where it's a good idea to invest in growth stocks. For instance, when the Republic set up the free trade zone to encourage capital investments in the Outer Rim, this legitimately caused an economic boom in the Outer Rim. And if you had any ETFs tracking Outer Rim stocks, well, this would have been a great place to put your money in. Suddenly you have all of these small and medium-sized companies establishing a presence out there because there's no tariffs, no taxes, no regulatory agencies to watch what you're doing, which of course led to some really crazy and brutal business practices like, enslaving workers and stuff like that. If you look past that though, during this time period, massive galactic corporations were being made every week in the Outer Rim, and this would have been a good time to look into some growth stocks like the Techno-Union Trade Federation, who both went from unknown entities to household names within a decade. The thing is, if you're a conservative investor, which honestly is the only type of investor I recommend you be, you're gonna have to really be careful with what kind of risks you take. And generally speaking, you probably should not invest in a product that you don't understand or an industry or company that you don't understand. You should believe in a company's management, their culture, their product, and how they generally do business. And so if you're reading all the trade papers about the Trade Federation, you would have known that their entire board was assassinated. And the Neimoidian faction of the company made a hostile takeover of the board shortly after that. You might be less inclined to do business with that company if you knew this, even if they do have a monopoly for all flow of goods and trades to and from the Outer Rim. And that would have been a wise choice because the rash behaviors of the execs at the Trade Federation would lead them to blockade Naboo, which of course would hurt the company's image tremendously. And then during the Clone Wars, the Trade Federation would be complicit with the secessionist movement, which led to its eventual collapse and destruction. Now, just because you're a conservative investor doesn't mean you can't look at growth stocks. I actually do recommend you, have a little bit of risk in your portfolio. As a matter of fact, for most retail investors who make a few million in their lifetime, they made most of their money off of one or two really good and big trades, and those are usually growth stocks. But there also is something known as a value stock, which in my opinion is a lot safer. These generally are older, more established companies that have been around for quite some time, and for one reason or another, their stock price is completely undervalued. This happens sometimes when a company is labeled boring by stock analysts, or the entire industry is labeled boring. Or sometimes there might be just a really sensational bad media story about that company that might change public perception of the company, but in the long term doesn't really affect operations at all. Generally, your average day trader at the Interstellar Stock Exchange will remind you that in more recent decades, growth stocks have outperformed value stocks. But remember, day traders are speculators, and they are after something very different from your average retail investor. And that's because they actually have to make a salary consistently every month or every 2 weeks on a market that has, cycles that are completely unpredictable. There are just going to be months, maybe even years, where you're going to be in the red as an investor, and you're going to have to be okay with that. Because the worst thing you can do is to be desperate, right? And have to access your money before it's fully matured. And most speculators are very desperate. I mean, this at its core is no different from gambling all of your credits at the Shabak table. A good example of a value stock that maybe a lot of people in the galaxy would ignore would be Quad Drive Yards. See, Quad Drive Yards saw a huge dip in their share price about 1,000 years earlier thanks to the Rusan Reformation. This was a policy that demilitarized the federal government and also put restrictions on how large capital ships can be and how many weapons and placements you can have on those capital ships. This hurt Quad Drive Yards a lot. But here's the thing, all of Quad Drive Yards' competitors will also be hurting, and most of these outfits will need to massively increase their personal and commercial vessel sales. Quad Drive Yards is already positioned quite well in this industry, and more importantly, it still retains that same advantage it has over other companies. You see, Quad Drive Yards is not just a company, it is a planet, and that's because its board not only runs the company, it also runs the planet. And so all the resources of the planet go into keeping this company alive and vice versa. That gives it a staying power that very few companies have. Plus, the quad orbital shipyards are the largest in the galaxy, and they can scale up orders for ships and decrease costs in a way that very few companies can. And while initially Quad Drive Yards being so large would have been hurt the most by the Rusan Reformation, they also have the most resources and capital to be able to quickly adjust and retool their facilities for other projects. Quad Drive Yards' corporate leadership has also always been very solid. They have a history of keeping themselves independent from galactic politics, and they also maintain good relations with all major powers in the galaxy. And so if you bought Quad Drive Yards at this period of time because you thought they were undervalued, well heck, you're gonna make a lot of money when it lands those contracts with the Galactic Republic for the Venator-class Star Destroyer and Acclimator-class assault ship. Then you're gonna make even more money when the Empire took over and every Star Destroyer was being produced at Quad, including the 19-kilometer-long Executor-class Super Star Destroyer. Of course, there's a bit of speculation even with conservative investing, with value investing. It's possible that Quad Drive Yards might get blown up by the Death Star one day. Who knows? But there's also the risk of losing your job and salary along with it. That's something else that people forget to factor in. We all really need to start growing capital at a very young age, and we need to maintain our investments all throughout our lives to have a chance for financial stability. It's not something they teach everyone, and yeah, like, you know, I have mixed feelings on the fact that people are required to go through this really complicated and confusing situation to ensure their financial stability. But again, this is how the world works, guys. You know, take it up with the higher ups if you have problems with it. Otherwise, try to learn some things here. Now, if you want zero risk, you can always buy government bonds or Galactic Republic bonds that are officially guaranteed. Or you can focus on companies that are so large and so crucial to the day-to-day operations of the galaxy that they'll never fail or collapse, like a utility company. For instance, Coruscant Energy provides the city planet with the majority of its electrical power. They're the only company with intimate knowledge of the planet-wide electric grid, which was built tens of thousands of years ago. And let's be honest, no one even actually knows how the whole system really works anymore. And yeah, Coruscant Energy is a bloated bureaucratic mess. There's probably a lot of corruption that goes on in this company, but it is a safe bet. The future of this company is not all that bright or exciting. The only positive thing I could see happening to Coruscant Energy is that it becomes more efficient, which again is not going to attract investors. But I also know that Coruscant Energy will never be allowed to fail by the planetary government. And if Coruscant's planetary government fails, well, you'll have bigger issues to worry about. And Coruscant Energy also knows this. It understands that it is a messy company, that it's not efficient, that it's a boring investment. And so what it does is it pays its investors dividends of 10% a year. Now keep in mind, you still have to pay taxes on any profit you make when you sell your stock, and you also have to pay taxes when you get your guaranteed dividends, which is also one of the downsides of depending on something like Coruscant Energy. But 10% guaranteed every year is not a bad thing. It also should be noted that most companies that have dividends are most likely giving out dividends because otherwise their stock is not very appealing to most investors, and there could be some deeply rooted institutional or even industry problems that prevent these companies from being excited. And so like that short-term profit is just being used to, you know, entice people to invest. Anyway, guys, I'm not a fiduciary. This is not really true financial advice. You know, I'm just some random YouTuber. But this is information that is readily available out there on the internet. Anyone can read about this kind of stuff. This is just basic investments 101. And you know, the reason why I do this is because you guys watch all my videos. You guys go through all my really crappy ads, and I appreciate that. I mean, that's how I make money. That's how I take care of my family. And so what I want to give back to you guys is just some information about how the financial industry works and how this is really how our society works. And you know, from a very young age, since I was delivering pizzas I've understood this, and I've always maintained a portfolio because of this. And this is the only reason why I have financial stability. And so, for a lot of you guys out there, I know this seems complicated. It seems unfair that you have to go through all of these complicated steps to ensure your financial freedom and future. But, rather than complain or just be taken back by how crazy the situation is, my advice is always to learn, to be rational, and to soak up as much information as possible. And don't be a freaking victim. Take your financial future into your own control and determine your own future. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. My name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. I'll see you next time.